Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my Suicide Squad trailer video. DC just dropped a brand new Red Band trailer confirming that the movie will be rated R. It's coming this August to HBO Max, so I'll explain what's going on with the plot and where it fits in with the Justice League timeline, especially because we just got done watching the Snyder Cut. I'll also explain how this fits with the timeline of the first Suicide Squad movie because some of the characters like Rick Flag and Captain Boomerang, Amanda Waller, Harley Quinn are all coming back from that first film. So it isn't replacing or rebooting the first film. The first film still exists in the continuity. They probably have a funny way of referencing it during the events of this film. And they finally confirmed who the real villain of the film is going to be. It's going to be giant freaking Starro, confirming my big theory from the last big trailer video. Way back at DC Fandom, they released the footage with a bunch of behind the scenes, and you could actually see actors on the set with Starros covering some of their faces. So it was like, okay, Starro is probably figuring into the plot somehow. I love the way they reference it within the context of the movie too, like the Suicide Squad says, look at that giant freaking kaiju. Probably the other coolest detail that you may not have noticed, or some of you may have figured this out, but King Shark obviously hilarious during the trailer. It'll be fun to see him during the actual movie, but you may have detected that he's being voiced by Sylvester Stallone. Steve Agee is doing the motion capture for him. He's playing the physical King Shark when he's running around on set. It's just Sylvester Stallone doing the voice of King Shark. When they announced that Taika Waititi was going to be doing a voice during the film or playing a character, my assumption was that he was going to be King Shark and they would just do a Kiwi shark, but James Gunn said that Taika is playing somebody else, but he wouldn't say who. So now my theory is that Taika is going to be the voice of Starro, because what would be funnier than a Kiwi sounding, like a Korg sounding giant starfish from outer space that mind controls everyone? Probably one of the other biggest Easter eggs, at least metaphorically in the trailer, is John Ostrander's big cameo scene. He's actually the person who's putting the bombs in each of their heads. If you're not a big comic book reader, he was the person who created the Suicide Squad in the comics. But I'll explain who the rest of the characters are if you're not totally sure what's going on, because they have some really obscure characters in here. But it's just like Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn is doing the exact same thing, getting you to care about the C and D-list characters that you never thought that you would before. They open the trailer with a rescue mission to get Harley Quinn. She's apparently been captured by one of the other villains during the film. There are multiple villains, but Starro just happens to be the biggest villain, literally and metaphorically. The big joke, though, that when they go to rescue her, she's already saved herself. Like, oh, sorry guys, I could just run back inside. You could try and save me again. Don't worry. The opening scene here also gives you a really good idea for what the group dynamic is, what all the relationships are like. Like, they all kind of hate each other, they don't really trust each other, but they are a team, and Rick Flag wants to save Harley Quinn because she is a member of the team. For those of you wondering, Idris Elba is playing Bloodsport. He is a comic book character. The reason why he got thrown in Bel Rev prison is because his character shot Superman, Henry Cavill's Superman, with a kryptonite bullet. So just to explain the timeline on that, like when did that happen? This movie takes place after the events of the Justice League movie, so here's where we get to the timeline, and we get into a little bit of multiverse territory with the ending of the Snyder Cut, because there are a couple alternate endings during that film. Right now, what Warner Brothers is considering the canonical ending of the Justice League film is this moment here where they're all getting ready to board Batman's ship to go back. Then you have the series of endings, and you end with Henry Cavill's Superman opening his jacket and flying off into the sky, and that's the end of the movie. So they don't really consider the epilogue, the nightmare scene, or the Martian Manhunter scene to be canon. So at some point after that, Henry Cavill's Superman gets shot by Bloodsport using a kryptonite bullet. And even though he doesn't get killed, he gets sent to prison after they capture him. This movie does take place after the events of the first Suicide Squad film. I don't know how long after the first Suicide Squad film. They'll probably explain when we get closer to it coming out. But Rick Flag, obviously still alive, Captain Boomerang is back, and Harley Quinn from that first team. We have the same Amanda Waller who's back playing the character. But this time the team's mission takes them to Cortol Maltese, so that's where most of this movie takes place. But it sounds like something really shady has gone down, and Starro is involved, but there's also this big coup involved with this foreign army. So it's just one WTF moment out of the frying pan into the fire situation. Like, you go from bad to worse to even worse through the film. They do a little bit of a roll call at the beginning, but you know who most of these characters are. Like, John Cena is playing Peacemaker, the way he describes him, and he's like the douchiest version of Captain America you've ever met. Like Captain America if he acted more like the Punisher. And they're doing a Peacemaker HBO series that they're filming right now. James Gunn is doing it himself. It's basically built to be a spin-off of this new Suicide Squad film. So we'll get the Suicide Squad film in August. Then in January next year, they're going to drop the Peacemaker show on HBO Max. It'll be 8 episodes. It'll be like the big budget DC series, like the Batman HBO series that Matt Reeves was hyping up. James Gunn wouldn't say when it takes place, but I'm assuming it takes place after the events of the Suicide Squad film, but it'll also cover his origin story, and it'll involve a lot of characters from the Suicide Squad movie as well, crossing over onto the TV series. We'll probably get a trailer for that when they actually release the Suicide Squad film. They use the rest of this opening scene save to introduce the rest of the team as well. Like you have Michael Rooker playing Savant, Alice Braga is playing a character called Sol Sarai from the comics, Pete Davidson is playing Blackguard, Sean Gunn is playing Weasel in another Rocket-like performance. He also does the motion capture for Rocket on Guardians of the Galaxy. Nathan Fillion is playing a character called TDK, which isn't a name from the comics, but the name TDK might stand for the Detachable Kid, which could be just another way of saying that he might be a version of Arms Fall Off Man. Detachable, arms fall off, his powers are basically exactly what they sound like. Obviously, you've seen King Shark, I've talked about Sylvester Stallone doing the voice. It's basically just like he is in the comics. Hello, I'm King Shark, I'm a shark. I was so happy when they confirmed my theory about Peter Capaldi playing a version of the Thinker, much more comic book accurate version of the Thinker. They did him on The Flash season 4, I think it was. I wasn't super happy with the way they did his special effects towards the end of that series, but I'm sure this big budget Peter Capaldi version will just be absolutely ridiculous in the best possible way. They're also doing Mongal from the comics. She's a version of Mongol's daughter, so obviously they're going very cosmic with the movie as well, because the villain is a very cosmic villain, Starro. I don't know if they're going to have any Warworld Easter eggs during this or not. Harley Quinn's costume seems like it's inspired by the alternate red version of her costume from the comics. And as far as I can tell, this movie takes place after the events of the Birds of Prey movie. Movies in the DCEU tend to move in a linear fashion, unless it's like a Wonder Woman situation where it takes place in the past. So at some point after the events of the Birds of Prey film, she just got thrown back in Bel Rev prison. David Dastmalchian you might recognize from Ant-Man and the Wasp, or as Abracadabra from the Flash TV show. He was actually just in last week's episode of The Flash. He is a comic book character, he's playing Polka Dot Man, just as ridiculous as he sounds. Flula Borg is playing Javelin, he's a character from the Booster Gold comics. Most of you might remember him from YouTube. It's weird to see a YouTuber show up in a movie this big, in a role that big. I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say people will probably enjoy this Harley Quinn movie a little bit better than they enjoyed the Birds of Prey movie. They do another montage introducing you to some of the newer, weirder characters like Michael Rooker's character. I always love seeing him show up in James Gunn's films. They did a lot of these types of scenes during the first film, but I feel like it got so muddled and they had like 2 different intros for all the characters during that. I have a lot more faith in James Gunn's ability as a screenwriter because he's both a really good proven writer, he knows his comics, he's a longtime comic book stan, and he's got a proven track record as a solid director of big films like this. All these jokes feel like very classic James Gunn, like listening to John Cena go on about how he would love to eat all the dicks on the beach if somebody ordered him to do it. That's a pure James Gunn joke right there. He's probably one of the few people that could get John Cena to deliver a line like that. Like, wait a minute, you want me to say what in this movie? The whole thing with Nathan Fillion and the Pib, too. James Gunn explained that Pib is the only soda that he likes to drink, so I have a feeling that that's how it wound up being in the actual movie. It sounds like, based on the narrative in the trailer, the way they're presenting these scenes, that Peter Capaldi's Thinker has something to do with them infiltrating Corto Maltese in whatever the actual mission is, what it is that they're actually going for. Because Starro sounds like he's as big a surprise for them in the moment as he is for us, the audience, finding out that he's in the actual movie. The whole thing with them hyping up the tagline, "Don't get too attached," is the idea that it's called the Suicide Squad for a reason. They are extremely expendable. So don't get too attached because some of them might wind up dying. James Gunn didn't say how many, but I'm sure some of them will wind up coming back for sequels if the film does well enough. I don't think that's going to be very hard to do. I feel like anything would be an improvement from the first film. But apparently DC liked what he did so much that they gave him that Peacemaker HBO TV series. I think with the exception of a few odd flashbacks, most of the film is supposed to take place between Bel Rev and Corto Maltese. If you're not familiar with Corto Maltese, that's also a big location in DC Comics. It showed up in the Batman comics originally, but it's an island like Madripoor in the Marvel comics. It's just a place where a lot of really shady people go to do business. Big black market area. Overall, it looks ridiculous in the best possible way. I can't wait to see more footage, and they just let James Gunn crank all the dials up to 11. But if you spotted any big Easter eggs during this that I didn't mention during the video, just write them below in the comments. I did videos for the other footage that they released a while ago at DC Fandom, so I'll link that down in the description below, and some of the other DC Fandom trailers like the Batman trailer. There's been a bunch of DC footage. Don't forget, we're also getting the Batman movie next year around this time. While you wait for everything, everyone click here for my brand new Justice League Snyder Cut ending and end credit scene video, and click here for my brand new Falcon and Winter Soldier Episode 2 video. Thank you so much for watching,